Greetings, comrades. My name is Gigantles, and there's a couple of things I'll be discussing this week. So, firstly, I'm having a problem with buses, and that's because where I live, as part of my student accommodation, I'm not on campus of my university. There are other accommodations on the university campus, but I booked this one before those ones opened up. So whenever I need to go to university, I have to get the bus. Now it takes about, on average, around 20 minutes to get from the bus station to the university. But lately, there's been a lot of problems with the bus schedules. So due to various colds and stuff, okay, so for starters, due to various colds and stuff, a bunch of the scheduled buses have been cancelled, but they don't put that on the website. So you go there waiting for the bus, and you're like, "Where's the bus?" And it's not there, and you have to wait for the next one to come along. The second problem is that there's apparently roadworks or something in my area, which means that which means buses are delayed, and some of them are completely cancelled. The third thing, and I don't know what the odds of this even were, but basically, I was trying to at one point in the afternoon, I was trying to get a bus, and I thought I'm going to go an hour early to university. One of the buses had broken down inside one of the the car parks of the buses, so the buses would come into the station and you get on and leave. But one of the entryways into that little area had been blocked off by a broken bus, and so I had to wait there until the tow truck came and took the bus away, and then had to wait for a new bus to come along, and all the schedules were thrown off after that. And I got there with only a few minutes to spare. Then there's also the addition of traffic. The addition of traffic. I was speaking with my lecturer in the early evening about the subjects I could be doing for my dissertation, and I ended up leaving at like 5 or so, and I got on the bus, and it took over an hour to finally get back to the bus station because there's just so much traffic. And it's problematic because it's getting quite cold here. So you're sitting there on a warm bus, completely surrounded by the cold weather, and I'm just busy trying not to fall asleep whilst I'm on this bus. It's hard enough trying not to sleep in lessons when it's really late, but trying not to fall asleep on the bus and miss my bus stop, it's a struggle. And then fifthly, there's the fact that as the winter months continue to close in, I'm going to have to deal with buses being even slower to avoid slipping on ice and stuff. So that's going to be fun. I am trying to just get earlier buses, but ultimately, it seems half the buses I get are cancelled, or half the buses I meant to get are cancelled, and the other half are delayed by several minutes due to various things happening on the road. So yeah, that's the fun part of this week. Yeah, I still got my cold. I know it's irritating. I'm trying to do something to get rid of it. The second thing I'm ready to discuss this week is, well, it relates back to what I said in an earlier video of mine about potential wars with Ministries, and that's because at that point in time I'd been planning one series of posts and one critical post about a couple of other ministries on Facebook and on Blogspot. Is that what it is? So the first one was about the lay pope, and I've already covered him in a video talking about how he's a heretic and he's promoting various contradictions to Catholic teaching. And I'm currently releasing a series of posts about that, each one focusing on a specific post of his. I think the most recent post I did about him was him trying to promote a vegan diet for the entire Catholic Church and why that's flawed. And then I also did another one talking about, and then the last week I think was about okay, now I can't remember the last week. What was last week's about? Oh yeah, the democratic papacy, in which all Catholics vote for the next pope. Really stupid, I know. And the second thing was about, sorry. Yeah, if I talk too much, I just start coughing, and it just sort of builds up, so apologies for that. Anyway, the second ministry I clashed with was one known as Shammy's Crusade. Now, the guy who runs it, he tries to make it some sort of edgy Catholic meme page, and he just basically puts forward a bunch. Some of the content is Catholic, others are just edgy, such as various. I know that a lot of Catholic pages will make jokes about crusades or it's time to go crusading or whatever, but when you look at the context of Shami's content, wow, okay. I know it's irritating. It's more irritating for me than you. But when you look at Shami's content in context to the rest of his posts, you just sort of get put off by by the sort of stuff he's posting. At one point in time, he made a post in which he seemed to promote torture, and although the post said the post basically showed a knight standing outside a dungeon saying, "Me after torturing the Antichrist," and when I saw this, I was thinking, hold on. A, you can't torture the Antichrist if you're trying to make him as some sort of demonic figure, because that would mean that he doesn't have a body. B, if it isn't a demonic figure and an actual human, why are you torturing them? Torture is against the teachings of the Catholic Church. And taking that into account, so maybe like B part 2, if torture is banned by the Catholic Church and torture is known to be the least accurate way of getting information out of someone, does that mean Shami is just promoting some sort of sadism there when it comes to torturing an Antichrist figure? And I could go into the whole theology behind torture. I'm not prepared to go into a huge debate about it right now, but I know enough about the church teaching to know that torture, under no circumstances, is to be used. And I know people bring up stuff about the Inquisition, but we need to remember that was several hundred years ago, and not everything that happened in the Inquisition went as planned. But the main concern that I had about Shami's crusade was his attack on the practices of the Eastern rites. So he published a post. The main part about the post was the image in which it said, I can't remember if I showed you this before, but basically it said, "I stand against modernism by kneeling for the Eucharist." And then in the description for the post, he said, "Also, receiving communion on the hand is sacrilege." This is meant to be an attack on everyone who goes to the Novus Ordo Mass. But in his ignorance, Shami is also attacking those who are in the Eastern rites that receive in the hand. And in the midst of this argument with him on my page, I actually joined an Eastern Catholic site and was asking questions about reception of communion in the Eastern rites. Sorry. And I had some interesting answers from all over the rites. They were talking about across the Byzantines and Armenians and Copts and Chaldeans and Maronites. They said stuff like, "Oh yeah, we receive in the hand, we receive on the tongue, we receive on the spoon, we receive in the napkin." The napkin, so they receive in their napkin, hold it like that. So I got a lot of interesting answers. But the point was that Shami was effectively criticizing an entire not entire section really. He was condemning entire rites, the Eastern rites of the Catholic Church, as performing sacrilegious behavior. But in order for that to happen, then that would mean the magisterium would be corrupt and having completely lost its spiritual authority, because a valid magisterium can never approve of sacrilegious behavior. Also, a lot of the customs of the Eastern rites are apostolic, and when it comes to reception of communion why can't I pronounce stuff properly? Communion in the hand, it's actually an apostolic tradition which the apostles taught the Maronites and Chaldeans. So for Shami to say it's sacrilegious, he's basically saying that the apostles were promoting sacrilege. And I pointed this out, saying you're completely undermining the magisterium and apostolic tradition. And he said, he was pretty much going, "Yeah, don't care." And he, for some reason, had some strange fascination with sore butts, because a friend of mine had actually criticized him on an earlier post of this. And he said, and when my friend argued with him in a group, he said to him, "Are you still butt sore? Do you still have a sore butt, or are you butt sore about that still?" And then my friend chose that moment to share a screenshot because apparently he was actually arguing with the admin of the page, who was just sharing his content in everyone's groups, and he basically found a screenshot he took a screenshot of the pages that the admin of that page followed, which included I'm not going to put the screenshot up here, but what was it? It was called boobs for vets. Basically, it was the admin of the page indulging in immoral content, And he put that up there saying, look, if you're going to launch ad hominems against me, perhaps we should start with you before you try and act all holier than thou. And he ended up pushing the guy into a theological corner, and he was blocked. My friend was blocked by the guy. But then it got into an escalation when my other friends were sharing my content in other groups, and he tried to confront them there, and they were like, why are you shooting the messenger, man? And then he came onto my page and argued with me, and then I pushed him into theological corner, and he pretty much had nowhere else to go. As of now, as well as the lay pope, I don't have a response from either of them on their pages or whatever. But it definitely shows a large problem with being part of the not traditionalist, because if this is meant to be this guy's not this guy's not considered traditionalist because he's solely going for the Latin Mass and completely ignoring the Eastern traditions, which makes him a rad trad effectively. But this is part of the wider ignorance of the rad trads, that they are so ignorant of the practices of the Eastern rites and so focused on targeting the Novus Ordo Mass that they're willing to condemn the practices of the Novus Ordo Mass, even if it means condemning the practices of the Eastern rites. Because even if the Novus Ordo Mass, which I like to remind everyone, is older than most people on Earth now, it's hardly a new mass anymore. It still incorporates old elements from other rites and traditions into it. So simply condemning something as sacrilegious within Novus Ordo Mass, but then somehow providing some sort of a condition which makes it not sacrilegious in other masses, that's very hypocritical. It also goes against the Pope, who, remember, the Pope is the one who runs the Western Rite, okay? There's only one Western Rite, okay, other than the smaller ones, but they're insignificantly small. Moving on. The Pope pretty much runs the Western Rite, the Latin Rite, and it's up to him to decide what happens in it. That's one of the advantages of being the head of the Rite. And if he decides he wants to have the Novus Ordo Mass in there, and he wants to incorporate elements from the other masses to have some similarities with them, he's perfectly allowed to do that. But to condemn the practices of the Novus Ordo Mass, and by extension the practices of the Eastern rites, it's showing an ignorance in history, and that's something we criticize the Protestants for. But ironically enough, now we're condemning the Radtrads for it too. Which, if you think about it, Radtrads are just new Protestants, because all they're doing is protesting against everything the magisterium is teaching or saying. They don't adopt all of Protestant theology, but in terms of what the name Protestant actually means, it's already the origin of the name, they're just new Protestants. And it's a shame, because they're masquerading as Catholic. Like the lay pope, I mean, he's on the other end of the spectrum. He's a very liberal Catholic, but he's promoting himself as promoting himself as a Catholic page when he isn't. Shami's Crusade is promoting himself as a Catholic page or traditionalist Catholic page when he isn't. But ultimately, if there's something to learn, is that just because someone runs a blog, sorry, that was a bit loud. Just because someone runs a blog or a meme page doesn't mean that they're entitled to teach theology, or that the theology they teach is correct. And you may say, hold on, isn't that being hypocritical of yourself? No, I'm perfectly fine with people investigating the stuff I say about the Catholic faith. I'm more than prepared to prove why what I'm saying is Catholic and how it's backed up by the scripture, the magisterium or apostolic tradition. I'm perfectly fine with that. But it's with these radtrads who see themselves as sola Latin Mass and rejecting and deciding which ecumenical councils are valid and which aren't. They're as well as the liberal Catholics by extension, they're the ones that you don't trust. Sorry if that sounded like a rant. I'm still a little bit irritated about Shami not even bothering to defend himself. Like, I thought he would put up a bit of a fight at least, but he didn't. But oh well. So, two main things really from this video. Buses are a problem, and I've argued with both the lay pope and Shami's Crusade. They haven't really the lay pope has no response. Okay, careful hand gestures. The lay pope has no response, and Shami's Crusade gave a pathetic one and ran away before he even proved himself Catholic in what he was teaching. So, just be careful out there what pages you follow. Just because it's a meme page doesn't mean it's teaching Catholic teaching, and just don't take anything for granted when you hear it. Okay, make sure that there's references that you can follow to determine it's a Catholic teaching. ultimately. I guess by extension, if anyone makes a claim about something that sounds weird, make sure that you can that they can also support it with references. That's a general rule of thumb when it comes to academics. But anyway, I'm probably going to bore you soon, so have a good week, all of you. God bless you all. See you in the next video, comrades. Until then.